Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video I will be showing you how to replace your turbo cartridge. As you can see, there is a big play in the shaft. This requires a new cartridge. A little side-to-side play is perfectly normal in a used shaft, as the space between the shaft and bushing would be taken up by oil pressure during turbo operation. However, this one requires a new cartridge. First, I start with removing the exhaust outlet housing using a 10mm. There are 6 bolts holding the housing and the cartridge. The common signs of a failing turbocharger are excessive exhaust smoke, poor acceleration or throttle response, loud noises upon startup, reduced fuel economy, check engine light. The next step is to remove the actuator rod. This is by placing a flathead to the retaining E-clip. There are 1 in each end. It's now time to divorce the housing from the cartridge using a hammer or a mallet. A O-ring will also appear, that goes between the exhaust housing and the cartridge. If there are no form of damage, you can reuse it. Place the exhaust housing on one side. Coming back at the old cartridge, there is a nozzle ring housing that needs to be removed. There are 3 bolts that needs to be removed using T25 tool. Once again, if there are no damage caused by the cartridge, you can reuse the parts. Before removing the bolt, I use WD-40 and also hammer the T25 tool to the bolt to avoid slippage, as it will cause a headache. If you feel like the bolt gets tighter as you try to remove it, spray WD-40 again and tighten the bolt. This will help the product seep into the bolts to allow the stuck fasteners to loosen. There are a lot of possibilities when it comes to what can damage your turbocharger. These can range from foreign objects entering the intake of the turbo to loss of oil. While objects entering the turbo are a rare occurrence, the more likely cause of turbo failure is due to lack of oil. A turbo needs oil to function properly, as it is rotating at a high speed. That said, if there isn't enough oil, it can cause friction along with premature wear and tear to the turbo itself. If left alone, the impeller could get damaged along with other critical internal components of the turbocharger. Once again, using a hammer or a rubber mallet and a lubricant, remove the nozzle ring housing. Once the nozzle ring housing is removed, you will find the nozzle ring. The main purpose of the nozzle ring is to control the flow and velocity of the exhaust gases that pass through the turbocharger. Using a flathead, remove the nozzle ring. Look for any damages. If there are no damages, you need to place the roller pin to the slots as shown. These parts would need to be cleaned thoroughly before reinstalling. Now place the nozzle ring aside and remove the unison ring. When placing the unison ring back, you need to place the actuator pivot to the unison ring slot as shown. The unison ring moves the nozzle ring in the exhaust housing to determine the speed of the turbocharger. This is how the nozzle ring assembly is supposed to look. I would advise you to not turn the assembly upside down, as it will scatter and it's a pain to put back. When you are putting the part back, the nozzle ring pin needs to go to the cartridge indent and the actuator pivot to its slot as shown. By replacing just the cartridge, the remaining components can be salvaged and repair times reduced, which means more money in your wallet and less downtime for your vehicle. Once you have married the cartridge and the nozzle ring, check whether all the turbines are working using the actuator rod. This step is vital, as the turbine controls the flow and velocity of exhaust gases to optimize the performance of the turbo. Next is to install the nozzle ring housing. When installing the housing, you need to make sure that the extra hole next to the screw is parallel to the cartridge hole as shown. Now screw the 3 T25 bolts. Now it's time to install the exhaust housing. First insert the O-ring, and then the cartridge. There is an indent on the housing as shown. This is where the cartridge sits. Now screw the 6, 10mm bolts. The washer on the bolt is what is holding the cartridge to the exhaust housing. Now go back to the old turbo cartridge and remove the inlet housing of the turbo using 8mm. There are 6 bolts in total. Regular oil change is vital for turbo care, as failure to change your oil regularly can lead to the oil becoming contaminated and carbonizing inside your turbocharger, causing abrasive damage to the components inside. When installing the inlet housing, there is an indent on both the housing and cartridge where they will both sit. As part of any service, you should change the oil as standard. Ensure they use the right, high-grade oil, but it's also important to ensure that they replace the oil filter, which prevents contaminants from getting into your engine. This step is vital. Contaminated oil is one of the leading causes of turbocharger fault. Using a mallet, remove the old cartridge. Now it's time to install the inlet housing to the new cartridge. However we do so, you need to put rubber O-ring to the cartridge. First clean the area so there is no contaminant, and then it's time to add the O-ring. The main purpose of O-rings is to prevent air from escaping, as it acts as a sealing device. When the ring is squeezed between two surfaces, it takes up the clearance and then prevents any air from being released. Now it's time to install the inlet housing. However, make sure that you place the housing correctly as shown. Once again, make sure there are no contaminant in the housing or the cartridge. You also need to pre-lube the turbocharger before installing it in your vehicle. Now screw the 6 10mm bolts. I forgot to record installing the actuator rod, but they are installed using retainer E-clip. You have successfully reconditioned your turbocharger. Thank you for watching. If you did like the video, please make sure to comment, like and subscribe.